Hey, this is Sense, and this week I went to see Venom 2, or Venom Let There Be Carnage. I will give you a little bit of preface to this review. I did I did see the first Venom in theaters, and I have not seen it since. I did not really. I mean, it was an okay movie. I came out of it thinking kind of like a 3 out of 5 would be kind of my rating for it. Let's get into some non-spoiler review aspects. This movie is a little short. It is an hour and a half, which is very strange in this day and age. I do remember, back home when we had VHS and all that going on, I do remember watching a decent number of movies which were like that hour and a half. 97 minutes wasn't too crazy for a movie length. And then I remember seeing Star Wars for the first time, talking about the first ones. Now I'm kind of, if a movie's not hitting, that's not standard, but if a movie's not hitting at least 2 hours, I'm feeling like, what's going on here? But I did do a little bit of research before I went to see it because I was like, this is kind of a little short. Looked it up. The director said he really didn't want the movie to drag. He had a good idea, a good pace, and it's like an hour and a half is all there was to it. And I do appreciate that. And I'll say after seeing the movie, I do think it did fine, honestly. I felt like it didn't feel like it was too rushed, didn't feel like it was too long. I feel like it was pretty much the perfect length. So I think he was right. They didn't have more stories, so there was no need to drag it out. Hour and a half, there we go. The other thing about it is the rating. Some movies, like take, Wolverine, like the Wolverine. That was a movie where there was a lot of action, a lot of killing, but there was no blood, and everything was just kind of weird the way it was done because you could tell they were trying to avoid and trying to keep that PG kind of rating. And that does definitely affect movies a decent bit, but this one I think actually did just fine. Like, sure, it could have gone a little bit more over the top with the Carnage aspect of Carnage, but I think he still had a pretty decent body count, and they managed to still have a lot of stuff just not showing it. So I think that was fine. I had like, I don't know, a 10-year-old kid or something sit next to me in the theater, and other than him being overly hyper over certain aspects, he seemed to be fine with it. And so, I mean, I think it worked out pretty good. Performances I thought were pretty good all around. I do think I don't know, like maybe it's just a natural evolution of his character from the first one. But I do feel like Eddie had or Tom Hardy had a little bit of he had a specific look, and he seemed to be in it the whole movie. And I guess that is, like I said, ongoing from the first movie, but it's been a little bit since I've seen it. I guess about 3 years now, so it's not the freshest on my mind. But I did kind of feel like, man, you're looking like you haven't slept in 20 years. And I get that's what they were wanting in the beginning to show the story arc. But just how the way he looked the whole movie. And I don't know, I was like, did he ever not look like this? I can't really remember. But anyway, all that aside, his performances were still good. And I enjoyed the movie. So yeah, let's just get around to rating. I'm going to give this one a 4 out of 5. Did enjoy it more than the first one. Perhaps the first one should have been trimmed down, but I don't remember there being any real drag to it. I just didn't like when I saw the first one. I was going into with a lot more thought on how the comic books went. At that point, I had been still reading comics books quite a bit, so I still had how the comic book way of things going was still in my head. So it's so disappointing to see it go so far away. Eddie's character was kind of following what he should be, but then he was just not. And then the symbiote was also kind of here, there, overly jokey, in my opinion. And the bad guys and all that was just, that whole thing just ended up being very boring. I do remember I felt the last fight and the last one dragged on too much. This one had its own issues for the final part. I don't think it was actual fighting, but we'll get into that in spoilers. For now, like I said, 4 out of 5. I thought it was a pretty good movie. Let's move on to some spoilers here. I honestly thought I really enjoyed the setup and everything. I mean, I thought it was really weird how they connected it, and I still didn't 100% buy. I mean, they were just like, hey, the serial killer really wants to talk to Eddie Brock. And so that connection there was kind of weak. I know in the comics it wasn't specifically the best setup either. They were just like cellmates or something. And I was just like, all right, there we go. We just wanted to have a more Venom. Because Venom's turning into lethal protector, nice guy. So we needed to have a a return to basics, full out, killing Venom. So that's where Carnage came in. So that worked out nicely in the comics, but it still was a little it just happened. Here it was also a little strange because it's like, why was this guy specifically wanting Eddie? I didn't really get that. They try to give a solution of, well, I just wanted a friend. I thought you'd be friends. I saw there was something similar in us and all that. And I was just like, I'm just not really connecting with that. Once it actually started rolling and their interactions and the way that worked out, I thought was also really good. There was a little bit of an issue where I do feel like sometimes things happen more because we needed them to happen. But still, the interactions between Eddie and the symbiote kind of are the basis of the story, and that's what's so enjoyable about it. Again, I didn't enjoy it as much as the first movie, but now the second movie, I'm a little more used to it. I know that's what they're doing. I saw the trailers, so I wasn't too surprised going into it. I actually really enjoyed their interactions. Most of the jokes were from that, having a voice, basically running commentary in your head that other people cannot hear. Does lead to some pretty humorous moments. That's why I even gave it to Deadpool for a while in the comics. He had a couple different voices bouncing around in his head that were not his actually, but it adds a sense of humor to it to have someone who's just commentating, who's outside of the scenario, even though they are there with you. So that was pretty funny. Definitely a few good jokes with that one that had a whole theater cracking up a little bit, and just his interactions were just great as well. I do think Woody Harrelson, I enjoy him as an actor, and he did a good job here. I do think towards the beginning they were letting him cut loose a little bit more, and as the story went along, he wasn't able to be as fun because you needed him to be in Carnage mode more. And that was, I guess, the interesting angle here is when he was in Carnage mode, it was more the symbiote running the show and just acting off of his impulses, but it wasn't really him, right? So you weren't having any crazy dialogue while he was in symbiote mode as much. And so which was, the later half of the film. So that was a little bit of an issue. The beginning, he was funny, he was singing, he was in scenarios, and just the back and forth and some of the stuff he was saying I thought was pretty funny and interesting. And in the later half, they just had to make reasons for him to not be in the symbiote so he could talk. He couldn't talk while wearing the symbiote. But I think that was an interesting aspect, making the symbiote Carnage or whatever its own thing. Most of the other characters were there and they did their thing. No complaints. I was keeping a close eye out on, as soon as they showed a police officer, showed his name tag, and I was like, oh, Mulligan's in this? I will say, in terms of reading about symbiotes, actually my first real comic, like I knew about Maximum Carnage and all those story arcs from reading their synopsis and glancing at cover arts and stuff like that. But the first actual symbiote comic I read was actually Toxin, who is the offspring of Carnage. And, his host was Pat Mulligan. So as soon as I saw the P Mulligan on there, I was like, oh, that's him. I was like, so is he actually going to get it? They were really definitely a few scenarios where I'm like, wait a minute, is that person going to get a symbiote? I was like, I'm recognizing some of these characters. One thing I actually never realized, I never actually read any story arcs with Shriek in it, but I did realize while watching the movie, and it brought up a good point there, isn't Shriek kind of the natural enemy of the symbiotes? So how does that work? Because if I remember in the comics, she has a symbiote. How does her having a symbiote work? Does she not have screaming powers and she just has the name Shriek in the comics? I don't know. I'll have to look into that later on, but I did think that was a very interesting dynamic there. And they definitely set it up very well. Like I said, throughout the movie, some of the interactions, they didn't really explain the lethal protector part because that still involved killing and eating bad guys. And so it seemed like that's what they were leaning towards the end, but they just never actually did it, or maybe they did. I don't know. That part was not explained as well. They were really trying to make Venom a goody two-shoes type of character, so a lot of balancing there. But I do think, like I said, once they got everything rolling, which was a little bit of a bumpy start in how it began, the flashback to back at all that was just kind of a little cheesy, a little cliche. But once it started rolling in their interactions, and I loved all the cinematography and the car shots and stuff, that's another thing I need to talk about, the director. As soon as I was, again, a little lukewarm on this movie. Didn't love the first one, so I was a little lukewarm. I saw the director on there, Andy Serkis. I was like, all right, I'm in. I'm not saying I'm a huge fan of his directing work particularly, but just him being there, I'm in. I'm watching it. They did definitely rely a lot on the screaming Carnage a lot, but I was in a theater with some great surround sound and some other stuff, and I every time he screamed and it got louder and more crazy, I was like, well, they can't top that one, and then they do. Every time he did it, it got louder and crazier. The last one he did, I was like, I felt like I was back watching like Interstellar. I saw that one in theaters with IMAX, whatever. That one was definitely an experience. Some of the sound design that was crazy. This reminded me of that as well, less in an awe-inspiring kind of way, and more of a you feel it. It's visceral. Like when the last scream you hear from Carnage was pretty like, yep, I felt that in my bones. That's Carnage. They also did the thing, may have been the first movie again, I can't remember. But I always thought it's interesting in the comics, the ability to, even though it's technically a symbiote covering a person's body, the symbiote can just open a hole in the middle if it wants to. It can get stabbed through and the person inside doesn't. I always wondered, how does that work? But they stuck to it. Like they kept it going, but I was still like, that's kind of crazy. They also start showing some Venom stretching. This one, I don't remember him normally doing that as much in the comics, but it's something Carnage does, so they really show that very well. And I think the first movie to introduce that he's a little bit of a runt or a pariah or an outcast, a little bit of a underling, I guess, in a way in the species. He's not, a big deal. And yeah, I mean, Carnage, even though they didn't really go into explaining that it's supposed to be the offspring of Venom, but it is. Other than his same father, they had a humorous thing there with father, but they didn't really explain that whole side of things. But again, that's something you can leave for the comics, I guess. This is something born like a day ago, and it's just already tearing up cities in ways Venom could not even think about. I do think once the movie was going, all the pieces going together, the connection, what Cletus was after, what Brock wanted, this peace of mind and all that stuff. I think all those elements work together very nicely, and like the director said, it was a nice thrill ride kind of a movie. Now, my main issue with the movie does come in the ending, where I could see all the pieces and I could see where they were going, and I feel like the writers had the same thing, which the story said was Tom Hardy and another writer. I was like, that could be part of it. Maybe they're not as experienced with the writing side of things, but it's like, here's where they were going, all the pieces lined up to go here, and they got towards the end and they're like, all right, well, we're basically there, let's just go there. And it's like, you didn't actually fit the final pieces together. It didn't 100% make sense, right? All through this movie, Shriek has been perfectly fine with just decimating people and killing everybody, not caring about anything all along, right? But then at the very end, but obviously with her screaming and the symbiote not being as connected to Cletus as, Venom and Brock are, you could tell there's going to be an issue between the three of them, the way they're connected. It's a little bit of you would consider it a love triangle, but it's not really any love at all between the symbiote and any of the others. It's just doing its thing. But he is connected to Cletus. So I did see the scenario of them turning against each other popping up. But why they didn't really show a good reason for them to turn against each other. There's certainly a moment where she's like, "You're going too far, honey," or something. And the symbiote's like, "Shut up," and starts like basically slapping her around. It's like, but why? She didn't threaten to scream at it. It looked like she basically got her revenge. The symbiote's getting its revenge. She hasn't screamed at it. She managed to get her revenge without doing any screaming. And then the symbiote's going to kill Venom's ex or whatever. Why is she thinking that's too much? Like, what happened there for her to be upset? But she hasn't even gone to scream yet, so why is the symbiote turning against her so harshly? Like, I was like, what is happening there? You guys set it up, but you didn't actually show what made them fall apart. You just had them fall apart out of nowhere. And then, anyway, like I said, that was kind of weird. And then trying to explain what the connection between Eddie and Cletus was weird. He's like, you know what? You weren't, no one ever asked, why did I kill my grandma and my mom? It was because they were abusing me. It's like, said, like I get why he would want to do that, but we just showed us several scenes of you stomping brains in and doing all kinds of stuff that had nothing to do with that. This could be some last minute ditch attempt to humanize himself or something. Not that he thought he was dying, he thought he was winning the whole deal. So I don't know why he was going through that whole spiel. And then the other thing is, that still doesn't excuse you throwing your grandma down the stairs and killing her and grinning and laughing and running around like that was just weird. And then his "I just wanted a friend" thing, I felt wasn't as built up to. I don't know. It's like you kind of got it. Like you can definitely look back at the movie and say, "Oh yeah, I guess he would definitely need a friend. A pretty lonely guy." But I just don't think the movie specifically set up him looking for a friend as being a big thing. So I do think there's either when this kind of thing happens in a movie where a lot of little things in the ending, just other scenes where characters like were there and then they weren't there, and I don't know, just a little moving around the ending scenes that were just a little weird. And that kind of thing typically happens when they had to do like some big rewrites or reshoots, or there's some elements of the ending they didn't like or didn't want, and so they just kind of cobbled together. Because that's definitely what the very ending felt like. Not very ending, but the final fight, it's like you had like a lot of great stuff. Like the final fight itself actually did not bore me at all, but then you just got to that little part and it just got a little weird. But a little bit more time ironing out the script there would have made that a pretty perfect. And again, I think the runtime was great. So that's my review of Let There Be Carnage. I might be seeing the James Bond movie, or I don't know specifically. I'm not going to put any promises out there, but the sense, and that's my review. Have a great day.